So this is the Plan Update Subcommittee of the Harbor Management Commission. It is Monday, August 10th at 3:04. We have in attendance Jack Hirschler, Jeff Stedman, Cheryl Beacock, Mary Von Kanta, and Kim Taylor. And our first, if anyone from the public has comments, they can email the comments to hmc@fairfieldct.org with Plan Update Committee 8/10/20 meeting in the subject line, and we can include those comments in the minutes when we've received them. Email address will not be listed when we list comments from the public. So that takes care of the introductory stuff. Our new members, Cheryl and Mary, welcome. I think you know everybody. Mark and Doug are not with us, so I'm not sure how much more introduction we need. But we are honored to have both former commissioners, Mary and Cheryl, participate. And I think we can move right along to review the work that we've done and our areas of focus on the plan update effort. We have, as Cheryl, as you know, Mary, I'm not sure if you know, have a grant from the Connecticut Port Authority to pay for the work of updating the plan. We met a couple of times a year or so ago and decided that the four areas that we would concentrate on would be the updating the administrative and mooring procedures. We would include in the update goals and strategies for the two dredging projects and the work of updating the plan itself. We decided on that because those four areas have pretty much been the subject of most of our meetings for most of the last several years, and it seemed the most logical way to begin to update the plan was to bring it up to date so that it reflected the good work that we had done so far. So that's really how we got here. We had decided that we would have public meetings, which are required in order to update the plan, that we would have public meetings, preferably at the library and other facilities in town, and then COVID hit. And so we, have not been able to meet in person, and the notion of having public meetings is pretty much one that's on hold for the time being. And so Jeff Stedman suggested that we consider doing some surveys. So that's really kind of where we are in terms of how to get the public involved and how to perhaps duplicate a public input without getting a lot of bodies together in a small space.
Kim?
Yes?
Actually, this is Cheryl. Sorry to interrupt, but as you're speaking...
No, I'm glad you did.
It's occurring to me, and I don't know what the protocols for this are, but could we have everyone bring a chair, like a beach chair or whatever, and meet on the lawn of the Pequot Library, socially distanced, and invite the public to tune in there?
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought.
This is Jeff, and I don't know if Kim...
Yes.
Can we just interrupt from time to time?
Yes,
I think, Cheryl, that would depend on whether the town administration would give us permission to do that. And,
right.
And there's an executive order by the governor that still applies, I guess, for having remote meetings, and that includes the public being able to hear everything being said in real time.
Good point.
The public doesn't have to the public is not required to make comments if it's a public meeting, or you don't have to hear the public comments, but they have to be able to listen. So
I see.
Having an outdoor meeting like that, I think that would be problematic because the public, would not, if people who didn't want to go could not, unless there was a way for them to hear what was being said, I think that would be a problem. But maybe there's a way for them to hear what's being said, but outside there'd be, the noise distractions, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but I like the idea of having, we're required to have a public hearing, and I'm not sure that any of us have, whether we know that a survey is a substitute for a public hearing.
Mm-hmm. Right. But
good point.
And I'm sorry to interrupt again, but
no, please do.
The public hearing has to do with the adoption of the plan amendments, and the RTM would have to hold a public hearing, and it would be. But I think anything that we would do, or say the commission would do, would be in the form of a public meeting, where it's not a legal. There isn't a legal notice, and the commission. Whether because the town code and the state statute require the public hearing by the RTM, which is the legislative body, and would have to adopt any recommendations that were made, or any proposed revisions.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Please do.
This is Mary Von Cotta.
Yeah.
This is a meeting of a subcommittee, and it should be posted as a meeting. And anybody who was interested could certainly attend the meeting, but they are rarely attended by anybody because it's it's a work meeting is what it basically is, and we have done those subcommittee meetings and had them posted on the website back in the day. I don't know, Jeff.
But the subcommittee meeting is different, Mary, than a meeting of the Harbor Commission. When the Harbor Commission wants to hear public comments, as we had initially intended to do,
yes.
You'd invite people to come to a meeting of the Harbor Commission, and we had planned to have that in a large room. So now we're without being able to do that.
In other words,
we're thinking of other ways.
Yeah.
And we also prepared a PowerPoint presentation having to do with which we initially prepared for the purpose of informing the public and telling the or presenting to the public what's important about the harbor and why the plan is important, and as an introduction to getting public input or comments on what we're doing. So we have that presentation, and I think it was Jack or Kim suggested we might also consider making a video of that presentation, which is more than just the slides and the text on it, but that could also be on the town webpage. And then we discussed that other towns that were preparing harbor management plans for the first time did a public survey that they put on the town website, and they got input from people. So we were trying to think of a way. We thought that might work. So we were just trying to think of ways to involve the public up front, so that we don't go through the process of updating the plan and just telling people, well, here's what we did. What do you think of it? But we have input at the outset.
Well, here's my other question then. What about going ahead with the meeting of one of these topics and figure out, expressing what the problems that we know about have been expressed, and then going ahead and making up some, not making up, but decide upon some avenues that we might pursue and things that we might suggest changing before we go to the general public, who don't really, 99% of the general public does not know anything about what we're doing.
Right, and
so
hence
we have some meat to give them.
Yeah, well, hence that's why we were putting the presentation together and thinking about the survey, which would be served to inform people as well as just ask, what do you think about this?
Yeah, well, I'm going to make that part of what we do in a meeting where the general public is expected. But we don't have to have the general public invited to a subcommittee meeting. We just have to post that it's happening.
Right.
Yeah, and so we might want to know amongst ourselves define what we see as problems, strengths and weaknesses, and figure it out. And you guys maybe have already done that, but have a framework that we are working with already, not just going out and saying, well, what do you think to the wide world, that they don't think anything.
No, that's why we have to think up the questions, Mary. What questions we would ask to and we could certainly send that to everybody with a mooring permit. I think through the online system, and we could also then we'd have to think about how to reach out to people who don't have boats in the harbor but just enjoy the harbor through some other. And when Jack and Kim talked with the RTM early on this year, I think their impression was that the RTM was interested, but there wasn't a great deal of knowledge about the harbor management plan and why it's important, and what went into doing it so many years ago and why.
Yeah, well, that is one thing that needs to happen. What about asking RTM to give a short presentation to them?
Well, Jack and Kim already did that.
We did that. We did a presentation, Mary, in November, and actually it was filmed. It's on Fair TV as part of that meeting.
Could Fair TV pull that section out and give us a copy?
I think this is Jack. I think that they could do that, but I think that the presentation has been enhanced since then, and I think that Fair TV would have the time to do a special filming of the presentation as we have it now, with one or several of us presenting different pieces of it. And I guess my thought would be to both do a survey, but separately to do a video of this presentation, and at the conclusion of the presentation, invite people who watch the whole presentation to email us comments, thoughts, things like that as well, so that we'd have two mechanisms for getting input early in this process from the public. One through a survey, which is less time-consuming, and for people who are really interested, a more time-consuming commitment on their part, watch the whole video of the presentation and then invite them to offer comments. By those two different means, it seems like we would get the best chance of getting a fair bit of informed input from the public.
Okay, now the public that's going to be interested in this is going to be the boaters and the people who live around the harbor, and some people in other parts of Fairfield who think Southport is a den of rich people who don't care about Fairfield at all, which is very unpleasant and very unhappy state of affairs, but it exists. And so we need to know how to reach out to those groups.
Well, exactly, go ahead, Cheryl.
No, I was just going to say, I jotted down several questions, and I'll introduce them as needed. But my first question is, what specifically do we need from the public, and what do we want from them? Those are two discrete things, the types of feedback. I mean, we could be surveying out the wazoo, and that's not a small effort. So I'd be careful when we say, well, we can just do a survey. You raise expectations when you do a survey. So we might want to limit the scope and really try to understand what do we need out of that survey versus what do we want. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, and that's a really important and that's a good question.
Yeah.
Jeff?
Well, my thought is what we want is in part to educate the public and to increase people's awareness that there is a harbor management plan, why it's important, why the town did this, and what we're going to do now, which isn't to prepare a new plan. It's essentially to update what we have and to reflect or to basically a lot of the recommendations in the initial plan have been accomplished.
Yeah.
So
sorry, go ahead.
So that's part of it, and then I think the other part is are there issues that people see, and I think we could separate them out. Are you concerned with any public safety related issues? Are there environmental quality issues that you're concerned with? Do you think the access? Can you see room for improvement for access to the harbor? They're just a few basic sorts of and what do you think? Do you agree with our priorities? We laid out the priorities as Kim said at the beginning. So I wasn't envisioning like a real the ones we did for New London and West Haven were they're sort of complex, and although in West Haven there were over 600 people that responded, but it was a wider set of questions. Here I think it's more simple, in my opinion.
Well, when I think survey, I think, okay, do we want a statistically significant sample size? What percentage of returns are needed? How do we ensure a cross-section of the population? Who's going to provide the feedback? Who's going to aggregate the feedback?
So
are we prepared to...
And also, what about
if you don't mind, I just would like to jump in with something. I understand the comments on survey. They're very valid. I think we should maybe consider changing that to a questionnaire, so that we don't necessarily need something to be statistical. But I want to just off the heels of what Jeff was saying. I mean, I'd like to offer two things. One of them is on the education. I think what we want to do here is inform the public of three things. First, that there is a plan. And then provide them some access to getting that plan, whether that's video or online or whatever that might be. Second is to notify them that we're going to update the plan. And then third would be that we're seeking input from the public to gather ideas for consideration when updating the plan. I mean, I think that's the general drill here.
That's reasonable.
The comment I would put in, and I'm gonna borrow this from something else I've seen done in town. I cannot speak to its success or not, but I was a participant of it as a resident, not a part of the committee. But when Fairfield went through its strategic plan effort, I do recall the community outreach part of it had three elements. One of them was that they were creating they were calling them workshops, but they had two different dates, and they gathered people. I think it was at the Penfield Pavilion maybe at the time. But they put a date out and said, come on down. And so whether that's at the lawn of the Pequot Library or somewhere else, we could create even an online workshop, but some kind of a workshop to invite folks. The second was a questionnaire, which was handled online. And then the third was a simple form that still lives on the Town of Fairfield's website, which is creating an opportunity for anybody in the community to provide input. And that form was pretty simple. It's live today on the town site. You put in your name, you put in your email, and there's a space where you could submit an idea.
Wow.
Has anybody thought about the portion of the harbor management plan which was imposed through discussion during the process of discussion by the federal government and the state government, and that we can't change? Those are things that the public ought to know.
Right, and that's very definitely part of this education, piece of it. We have a plan. This is what it does. This is what it is. Yeah.
And there are parts of it that we might consider changing. Not what the federal government said, and not what the state said per se, but things. Well, yes, when you get into that with the two dredging projects, the state, you get into that, Jeff. I hear you, but some of these things they could be changed. But basically, this is a federal project, and people simply do not understand that. That's number one. And number two, and therefore, as a federal project, it is open to any citizen of the United States of America, Well, you can't get in 300 million people into Southport, so they have a process, and it's called the town list.
Yeah.
So we had a person from California who had been on the town list for a long, long time. Then he moved back to Fairfield, and next thing you know, he was in the harbor because he was on the town list, not because he was a boy that everybody loved and known since he was 2 years old. And the other part of it is the state controls a lot of what we do in the harbor, and there are permits that need to be acquired and for certain things. And that process is also guided by the Harbor Management Commission, but those processes are in line. We can argue about those. We can discuss those with the state. We can get into more of a situation there. But I think we'd have to wait a very long time to get the Congress of the United States of America to change anything about Southport Harbor.
Yeah, but
we've already done their job.
But we've talked about that, Mary, in the presentation that we made or that we gave.
Yeah.
You know, so the harbor has to be open to all on equal terms, and you know
yes.
how we comply with that. You know, there's a bit of, and we developed a way that we comply with that policy.
Right.
And as far as the DEP goes, yes, the plan doesn't eliminate the DEP's permitting authorities, but no. it makes clear that the town has a significant role in that permitting.
Well, you lay it out.
Right, but we already have that.
And there's a yacht club list. And how does yacht club get to have how do they get to have a mooring area that they can control? And people need to know that. And those are the subjects that will make people's ears turn red until they know what the facts are.
Well, but we don't want to revisit the issues that we had 30 years ago when people objected to the plan because they thought it was going to result in the federal government and the DEP taking over the harbor. We've resolved all those questions. So
yes, but nobody knows that, and they are going to say this is.
But wouldn't you consider that all to be part of the education? In other words, there is a plan; those things are all identified and illustrated in that plan. So that's a simple matter of exposure and education for those who want to consume it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's very, very important, and I assume it's somewhere in the plan, but I haven't read the plan in a long time. So, but those are facts, and I have just finished working on a subcommittee for Parks and Rec for the marina in South Benson Marina in Fairfield. The anger that to get access to the South Benson Marina is another sore subject, and it brings out a lot of grief.
Right. But Mary,
and it hasn't been resolved.
Right, but Mary, we're not. I'm sorry to be talking so much, but we're not responding to a big problem now, like there was 30 years ago. We solved all those problems. Now we're just updating, to take into consideration some changes in laws and what we have accomplished, and things such as, that we now own the lower wharf. When the plan was being prepared, that was a goal in effect to acquire that.
Well,
so we own that.
We don't own it. We manage it.
Well, the town owns it. The town
of Fairfield.
Right. Yeah. And now we. So I don't think we want to start out looking to raise all sorts of red flags. The plan works fine. That's something to educate people about and inform people about, and we have our priorities to update. But I don't think we want to get into raising red flags.
Yeah.
I think that Tim's and my experience of presenting to the RTM last fall is pretty clear evidence that it was more about, we didn't know that, and we didn't know that's how things worked, and they were more curious as the RTM, and I think that's how the public's going to be, but it was not at all controversial. There was not one thing that came up that was controversial in that whole presentation, and we spoke to them for, I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that. Yeah. So I would expect the public in general is going to have a similar view about our work as the RTM did.
So the real issue is, given the fact that we can't call people together and invite them to come down and listen to a presentation, it seems to me the real issue is how do we get the information What's the format, the forum that we use to disseminate information about what it is and what the plan is and what it does? How do we and how do we do it? Number one, and number two, if we have to target, and we obviously would any time have to target, but maybe even more important now, who do we target? How do we get people to bring? Do we invite? I don't know. I'm just pulling. Do we invite the Sasquatch group to send a group down to the library and sit on the lawn and we do a presentation? Do we invite? Can we do small groups? And who are these groups that are really our constituents, or people who are impacted by the plan?
Well, you can have the meeting, you can tell what the topics are, and you can post it. You can send out a notice about it, and then if nobody shows, you can just forget about it.
Well, I thought what Jack...
you can forget about getting to that public and just get going on the plan. Updating the plan. Or you can get them screaming and yelling. They certainly do not want us to do anything without their being given the advantage of being told what we are presuming to, what type of thing we are pursuing. That is.
Well, I've got a question. I've got a question for the group, which is, as I understand it, the current plan has not been updated in a long time, decades, correct?
Yes, correct.
Well, no, we've updated the rules and regulations.
This current subcommittee, which is looking to help drive an updating of the plan, at this moment in time, we don't have specific timing identified in terms of our timeline for informing the public of our intent to do it, the timeline for educating the public, the timeline for soliciting input, and then ultimately evolving it all the way down to the point that there would be more, public activity around our recommendations and things like that. So I would think one of the things we may want to consider is a realistic time frame for these things, particularly given the pandemic, because unless there's some sort of time pressure that suggests this needs to be done in the next 30 or 60 days, which would not be realistic anyway, if we map out a general timeline, we may find ourselves in a place where some of the things we're concerned about, like our ability to gather or other things, may be at this point months out anyway. In other words, we may choose to be pulling these workshops or whatever they may be together in, as we're well into 2021.
Right.
So maybe what we ought to do is first identify the steps that we plan to take and try and put some general timing around it, and then layer those steps against the current pandemic environment and see if it's even realistic.
This is Cheryl, but to that very excellent suggestion, is there a due date that we have, given the fact that we have money from the government to do this plan? Is that are we held to a specific due date to get the plan done?
No.
That's one question.
No.
Okay. Well, that's sort of the good news, right?
That is the good news. That is the good news.
So
I think that one thing we could think about, I think the idea that getting public input is a problem during pandemic and at some point in the future hopefully won't be a problem. I'm wondering if we've just been assuming that we have to validate and get the public's input on the priorities, although the Harbor Management Commission, which is better informed than the public about what the harbor needs, has already sort of weighed in on priorities. Maybe we wait a little bit to get public input, but we could move forward, since we have a very good idea of the priorities, and begin the work on updating the plan with an expectation that if we get some different direction from the research we do with the public, that we might revisit some of that work. But it feels to me like we could do work ourselves, notwithstanding the fact that due to the pandemic we had to do things in a little bit of a different order than we had originally intended to. I think it would be a shame because we've been waiting now for 2 years to get started on this project to say because of the pandemic we can't move forward at this point.
Right. Well, one thing that I think is, and I've said it's my opinion, the principal priority is to develop the plan for dredging the entrance channel through the sandbar. So that's what we've called our sand management plan, to be agreed to among the town, the Corps of Engineers, and DEEP, and that would then be institutionalized in the harbor management plan. So even though we maybe not made progress in updating a lot of the other parts of the plan, that the development of that sand management plan continues to proceed, and the Corps of Engineers has come up with a preliminary draft of the plan, and we were hoping in the next month or so to be able to actually have a meeting on site with someone from DEEP who said that they could travel to Southport. So that's a substantial, in my opinion, a substantial element of the updated plan, and that's proceeding, with the main responsibility right now with the Corps of Engineers. So I think that's going to be a positive thing.
Do we need to put that out to the public right now? The public doesn't really care about what we're doing there. They want the harbor. They want those to be able to go in and out of the harbor. I think the guy who really wanted the harbor to be the way it was in the olden days, which was fit for canoe, period, back in the real olden days, I think he's long since died. And I don't think he was ever replaced by anybody else. So we need to make our plan. This is our plan. We try very hard.
Right.
What we do.
That's what we're doing here.
Right.
And then we say, okay, this is what we've come up with the help of the federal government and the state government.
Right.
Well, we have the presentation, the presentation that Jack and I did that's been updated, and Jeff's presentation, which is ready to go to the public.
Right.
We have Jeff has proposed updated goals and objectives that he sent to me today that I can send to everybody for comment. Yeah. We can take a look at those, which include the dredging and and things that weren't envisioned when the plan was originally put together. So that we can get going on. The public education pieces. I mean, even that, I'm not sure. I don't know how others feel, but I'm not sure that we can invite, or whether we can invite, or want to invite, I guess is a better way to say it, everybody to come in and sit through the whole plan, or whether we have the more we break it up into not the whole plan, the whole presentation that Jeff put together. We break it up into smaller pieces and have 2 or 3 people give a talk. I mean, certainly we could identify those pieces and have people begin to get together and plan what those pieces are, even if we don't yet have an audience to present them to. Mm-hmm. And those also, at some point, may be suitable to put online, as Doug suggested, or even presented to smaller groups, or Lord knows how we're going to get together in the pandemic era, but something like that.
Right. And we do have a what I would call a critical mass already identified of the public, and that is the Pequot Yacht Club membership. So if you wanted
and the people who live around the harbor.
And right, but I would say those are 2 different populations. But if we're trying to, the struggle is how do we educate and get feedback from the entire public? You have a critical mass at the Yacht Club where maybe we could start there. It's just a thought.
Right. And how about the folks at your yacht yard?
Yeah.
That's a smaller and smaller population as time goes on, which may be a problem that people might like to speak about. I don't know, but I was looking at administration and mooring procedures. That's pretty cut and dried, right? You have some ideas as to what, I don't quite know what you mean by administrative procedures, but that would be a good thing to explore and perhaps define more. And the current mooring procedures, with the current involvement of the almighty computer, may have people who may want to make suggestions about that. Those are pertinent right now, especially to the people who are actually in the harbor, moored in the harbor. That you might want to ask for public input on. Any suggestions as to how we could make it better? That kind of thing. I'm not saying that's necessarily precisely what we have to do, but that's very concrete. We can say, here's what we're doing. This is the process that we're using now. We decided to do this because of blah, 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 blah. And now we would like your input as to how we could refine this process so it would be easier.
That's not the plan, Mary.
Yeah.
I mean, the plan is that the moorings, should be administered, fairly and according to a system that what you're talking about is the separate rules and procedures that are adopted separately, and it's the details of implementing a policy in the plan. So I don't, if we were to put together a presentation with different elements to educate people, as Jack said, we might have one element talking about that. But I think that's, well, anyway, so sorry to interrupt.
Well, I'm interrupting a lot, too. I said I wouldn't say a word, and I'm talking all the time. Goals and strategies for the dredging projects, you need to define the problem. You need to define who does it, et cetera, and then you need to say some of the things that are standing in our way, and then you get into all kinds of stuff, which you may not want to discuss with everyone.
Well, but that was also part of the presentation that Jack and I did to the RTM, and that was very well received. People didn't have a clue about about the competing jurisdictions and the fact that the harbor gets shallow. I mean, it was quite remarkable.
Yeah.
Jeff, can I recommend
the big question that has not been discussed is
to Mary and to Doug, who haven't seen it before, and that would be, I think, helpful for.
Yeah, would be. But one of the questions about the dredging projects is who's going to pay for them. That's a question, okay? And that will come up, and that's the one that would bite the yacht club and other people moored in the harbor hard if they had to shell out for that. And that's an issue.
Right.
And that will be raised.
Okay. And we'll address it when it comes up, Mary. But I think now we as somebody said, we can update the provisions of the plan based on our knowledge. The question is, do we want to proceed with a questionnaire to the public to help inform the people, and do we also want to do the presentation with a video presentation, as Jack had mentioned, with maybe different people doing parts of it? Do we want to do that? Do we want to move forward with those two elements right now? We have a draft of updated goals and strategies, and we also have a draft that, Mary, you and I worked on some years ago when we started, and we've taken it further, the policies. So we could do all this.
Some policies,
but we could do it all ourselves. The issue is we want to respect the public's opinion, and we want to educate them, and we want to make people aware that we care about what their input is. But we know how to do this. I mean, we could do it ourselves. But they don't
know. They do not know the public. All right. The group memory is very, very short. And when was the last time that, for example, that the memo of agreement between the Yacht Club and the Harbor Management Commission via the town, via the Harbor Management Commission, when was that last time that draft was presented to the Yacht Club to survey? When was the last time that the Harbor Management Commission thought there should be an adjustment to it? When was the last time it was just circulated amongst the board of the Yacht Club as well as amongst the commissioners of the Harbor Management Commission, so that everybody knew what everybody else was supposed to be doing? And maybe there should be some changes to that.
Well, maybe, but we can address that.
That's part of the mooring deal.
It's part of the plan. It's part of the implementation of the plan. But it works. the agreement works. The idea now is to update things and inform people, but it's not a problem that we're starting with. I mean, you're sort of discussing it as if it's a problem. It's not.
And I think this goes back to my earlier question: is what do we really need from the public versus what is nice to have? Mm-hmm. I'm still not clear what we're hoping to gain.
Well, I thought Doug's 3 comments were the basic comments. There is a plan. We're doing an update to it, and we'd like public input. What do you think are important? What do you think?
And answering the question of what do we need from the public, I think it's the third one. What this subcommittee needs from the public is input.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
About general input on anything, right?
Yeah. Well, I would say, input for us for consideration when updating the plan. The purpose of the input would be hopefully to identify, themes or areas of interest for us, when updating it.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So should we take a crack at the questionnaire, and then also how would we do that?
Well, I have not seen the questionnaire that Doug has referred to. I think that we have the certainly the surveys from New London and West Haven and the forestry surveys. We could circulate those and see if there are questions there that we think would be appropriate. But it sounds like the questionnaire that you're referring to, Doug, was a whole lot more focused than 5 pages of.
Well,
yeah,
I think using the surveys from the other groups is great, and I'm not in possession of the questionnaire. What I'm saying is when the town went through its strategic planning process and had a group managing that was a committee, and then I think there was some outside consulting support. Excuse me. They developed a questionnaire for that purpose. I recall participating in it. I don't have a copy of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the surveys that we have from the other towns would be a great starting point.
Okay. Well, why don't we we can circulate the I think there are 4 surveys, and circulate the surveys, circulate the proposed goal updates that Jeff has done, and plan to take a look at those.
Also the presentation. Let's make sure everybody's got the presentation handy.
Yeah. And actually, the presentation that you and I did, Jack, I think is still online, but the presentation that Jeff did to the whole commission is also online on the website.
Right. But just to make sure it's easy for people, maybe we can email us, Jeff?
Yes. I can't do it
that
until tonight. I'll do that.
Okay. So why don't we plan to take a look at the surveys, identify the questions that we think we would like to ask. Yes, Jeff?
Did Doug say that the questionnaire he was talking about had to do with the strategic plan?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can find that then. We should be able to get that from the town, just to see if that's
the 2, the questionnaire, and then Doug said there was a form for input.
Yeah.
I think that would be even.
On the town website, there is an area that is identified as Strategic Plan Committee.
Okay.
Okay.
And then within that particular area, they have their files and documents and, forms and meeting schedules. And I think, as I recall, there was also an area called Community Input.
Okay.
That also had this online form where people could submit ideas. And I think at this point, I don't think the questionnaire is live. I think they had a summary of, what came out of it.
We can get that. That will help. Yeah. No, I just think that there is a plan. We're updating it. The plan works well. It solved long-standing problems. It increased the authority of the town, and now we're updating it to reflect our accomplishments and set new priorities. And the memorandum, Mary, and some of that other stuff, we can look at that. But those are like the sort of regulations or the requirements or the details for implementing the policies in the plan. And I think everything works fine. We don't want to, well, anyway,
but it may turn out that when we get public input, that there's a whole that there are several ideas that we have never occurred to us. Well, then we can respond to those. But I think if we start out by saying everything's a problem, we have to start from scratch. We'll be doing this for the rest of our lives.
Right.
And I
don't. I think we should.
Yep.
I would try a sample. I would get a few people off to one side and have them take the survey to see what, if anything, they come up with, too, before I start shipping it out to the world.
Let's first figure out what
let's go.
Yeah.
But first, let's take a look at the surveys. We'll send the surveys around. We'll send the goals, the revised goals around, and everybody could take a look at the presentation that Jeff has put together, and we'll reconvene and having identified the questions that we think are important questions from the surveys, perhaps we'll have comments on the goals. At least we'll understand. We'll all be on the same page in terms of the goals that are being updated, and hopefully by that time we can also find out what these forms are from the town and begin to use those to take some of the questions from the survey and create our own forms.
Yep.
How does that sound?
Very good.
Okay.
Cheryl, Doug, Mary, Jack?
Yeah.
Sounds good. Have we given thought to how we will or will not weight the responses we get? For example, if we get a number of similar comments from the yacht club that we don't necessarily see from the other public, will we be weighting the yacht club input since they're a large component of the harbor? Will we be weighting their input more heavily than others? Have we thought about that?
I have it work.
Way ahead of us.
Oh.
I know.
You're asking if they will have more in. I have an air conditioner being put in right next to my right ear, and I can't hear. What was the question?
It's a question that maybe we haven't thought about. But if we get input from different constituencies, the yacht club is a major component of the harbor. Will we be weighting their input more heavily than others, especially if there are competing interests? And I can't dive any deeper than that. It's just going through my head. I don't think everyone's input can or should be weighted equally, but maybe I'm wrong.
That's a great
I don't think we should.
It's a good,
I don't think that. Yeah, it's a good question. You don't want to open that up either right now.
Well, I've found all these old pieces of correspondence and newspaper articles, and I don't know what the heck, trying to maintain them for the future. But I found the first letter sent by the Corps of Engineers to the yacht club. It was in 1983. Expressing in
that particular time,
expressing the concern, and I think we have to be careful about weighting the yacht club's interests over those of others. I mean, we don't have to have a formula for doing that, but we have to recognize that the the overall public interest and the commission in effect is I don't want to say an arbiter, if that's the right word, but we have to balance to balance the public interest with that of the yacht club, and that's how things got out of whack, and what led to the harbor management plan and the U.S. attorney and all the other stuff back in the 1980s, including the establishment of the Sullivan Line, which was meant to identify an area managed by the harbor and identify an area managed by the town, and that was anyway. But I think we can work all that. The plan, of course, supports the continuation of the yacht club as a valued water-dependent use, and the plan gave certain considerations and benefits to the yacht club. And in exchange, the yacht club has to provide benefits to the public. And that's what we have to maintain.
Right.
So we don't.
And that's established with the federal government.
It's established by the plan, Mary, in response to managing the harbor open to all on equal terms.
But I would say, Cheryl, that we also wouldn't give more weight to the folks who own property around the harbor.
Right. That's right.
Well, that's
exactly right. That's right. You're thinking along my line.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
My understanding is that the oath that we took as commissioners is to represent the interests of the town, not about people with waterfront property or people who happen to be members of the yacht club. Those of us who are on the commission represent Fairfield, Connecticut, and the citizens of the state of Connecticut. Yeah. And with respect to the point Mary made about it being a federal navigation project, in fact, citizens of the United States. So I'm not even remotely interested in weighing any particular interested group more heavily than others.
Yeah.
No, and they need to understand. Anytime somebody came up to me after I became chairman of the Harbor Management Commission, some member of Pequot Yacht Club, nice lady, came up to me and say, "Oh, goody goody, you are the chairman of the Harbor Management Commission. Now you'll take good care of us, won't you?" And I said, "No." I said, "I will take good care of you for the town of Fairfield.
Right.
I will do the best I can for everybody, but I work for the town of Fairfield."
Right. I think I misled you with the way I posed the question, and I don't want to beat a dead horse. I totally get that our interests are in the interest of the town. But if we have people that aren't voters, that are not familiar with the plan, and then end up with a cursory overview, having done a cursory overview of the plan, and we start getting input from people that really aren't, I don't want to say knowledgeable, but as informed as we might like, yet people in the harbor, whether they have public moorings or yacht club moorings, they are informed. Have we thought about, without compromising our objectivity, how we will weigh their input? That's my point. You can be getting input from people that live on Lake Mohegan about the harbor that have no clue how the harbor's run. That's my point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important question. And at this point, I think nobody has an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we consider the comments, and the commission makes hopefully a consensus determination, but without any sort of weights and measures and stuff. The commission deliberates and makes a decision consistent with that mission or goal that Jack just mentioned. I don't think we have to demonstrate it or prove to anybody what. Anyway, I think it's a good
hot
discussion.
It's a hot topic right now. There are a bunch of people who are really angry with the town of Fairfield right now over not only Fairfield residents being able to use the beaches in Fairfield over the weekend, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a hot topic, and it's very difficult because there was a lot of chit-chat in the beginning about having much more open access to the harbor than we have now. Anybody in the world who wanted to could come down here and use our ramp at the boatyard, et cetera, et cetera. And that got resolved by facts.
Yeah, right.
But
don't look for trouble, Mary.
That's the kind of mood people are in now.
Yeah, but don't look for trouble. It works fine right now.
I know,
have to continue the good management of it.
Yes.
Of the harbor.
And we will see what kind of response we get. Yeah. I mean, it may be that it turns out that that folks at the yacht club aren't nearly as interested in what we're doing as we think. So who knows? I think that's a discussion for another day. Yeah. I think what we want to do now, we want to leave it here. We will circulate. I have the surveys, Jeff, so I can circulate the surveys to everybody. Mm-hmm. I have a copy of the proposed objectives, revised goals and objectives. I will circulate that to everybody. And you're going to circulate the
presentation.
plan, the presentation
yes.
to everyone, and we will try to find that the
yes.
town strategic plan
yes.
forms and stuff, and we'll all take a look at it, identify questions from the surveys that we like, questions about the goal revision, and plan to reconvene with some ideas for
yes.
our own questions / survey / way to get public input.
Yes. That's a
you
good
want
discussion.
to set a time?
How about the last week in August? People around?
Yes, that would work for
I
me.
may not be around.
Yes.
Yeah. I may be not around, but you could do much better without me, I'm sure.
We could do Monday. Does Monday work for everybody? Monday afternoon?
Yeah.
Anybody Monday afternoon does not work for? We could do the 31st.
Sure.
The 31st at 3 o'clock.
That would work. Yes, for me.
Which day are we talking? The 24th?
31st.
The Thursday last one. Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
That's good.
All right.
Well, let's tentatively plan on that. The 31st at 3, and I'm pretty certain it's going to be the same format with a phone-in call, so I'll circulate an agenda and a phone number the week before, and we can reconvene and make some more progress.
Well, thank you for the very good discussion.
Okay.
That was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you all for taking time out this afternoon to join us, and let's adjourn this meeting until the 31st.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Can I ask for special help in locating what you want me to see on the computer? Give me more than just.
I'll help you, Mary. I'll find it.
All right. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
We'll get it to you, Mary.
All right.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Yep. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all. Meeting adjourned. 4 o'clock.
Okay.